It's time for your next favorite episode of the Integratedness Podcast with Jason and Jolene.
Okay, I'm not going to denigrate you by attempting to sing Happy Birthday on the show, Jolene, because that would be not good at all. Or is it your birthday? You said it was.
It is. The 19th is Wednesday. This is dropping on my birthday, bitches. Buy me a coffee. And cheesecake.
Cheesecake. Well, it's your next favorite episode of the Integratedness Podcast with Jason and Jolene. I'm Jason.
And I am Jolene.
And it's her birthday.
It is. So it's funny because we are talking about aging and ageism.
Yes.
Around this very monumental day of mine. What am I? 43. I don't worry about aging. I've never worried about aging. I still get ID'd. People think I'm like 26. It's kind of weird. I was always worried about being too young in my field and being discriminated against. So then I built a reputation and then I didn't worry about that. But it's a weird thing. I don't worry about aging, but I see and witness what society provides us in terms of what does aging mean. And it's really interesting to witness some of my clients going through a lot of this.
Well, I know when it comes to aging, women tend to get the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
When it comes to aging. There's an actress, oh God, what's her name? Kirsten Dunst. Started off as a child actress. She was Mary Jane in the original Spider-Man movies. And when she said, she almost stopped acting because when she hit 40, she was being offered sad grandmother parts.
Jesus.
Right? At 40.
But then you have somebody like Richard Gere who's killing it through his entire career.
Sean Connery was 75 kicking ass. And
right?
You know what I mean? And so that's Hollywood doesn't value aging at all, right? Men do get a little more leeway like that.
Yeah.
But women don't. But that's also, I think, representative to some degree of society as a whole. I start getting gray hair in my beard and all that, and I'm distinguished. Women panic and want to pull it out because they start being considered old or now unattractive. And that's just, I think, really unfair.
And I think during COVID, because people couldn't go to their hairdressers, they started embracing the gray.
Yep.
And many did swap. Actually, my mom was one of them, and she has lovely gray hair. But I do know some that swapped and then came back. I think Jillian Harris tried to and then decided, no, I want to diet. I do enjoy how I look. And, she's I think in her early 40s as well. So I think if I were probably in your demographic, Jason, I might be feeling differently about this because I would say that some of my 50 to 55-year-old clients are feeling the fear of being invisible. They're also at a stage of life where they've empty nested. So for me right now, I have a shitload of purpose. I have purpose in my work. I have purpose for my kids. I have purpose with my partner. I think once life starts to slow down, you and Kevin are in a very similar sort of older kid, more space in your home, more you get to do what you want to do sort of thing. Right. And I do think that there is a lack of feeling needed sometimes in some ways. That some people are expressing. So I do think there's gender differences, but then there's also this societal, you become less important the older you are. Think about public funding. We're trying to house all these homeless people who may have, oh God, I'm just going to really, I'm doing it, guys, who may have never paid a tax dollar in their life. And again, this is not their fault. They may have been in these circumstances. I'm not saying that makes them more or less worthy. I'm just going to point out something. We are putting up housing units for them for 4 months of the year because it's so cold out and this and that. However, there are people who are living off of pensions or didn't have pensions but worked at these part-time jobs or had husbands in the army or whatever who cannot afford housing, and we don't have anything accessible for our aging population the same way.
Who did pay their taxes all those years.
Totally.
Just let that sink in a little bit.
Yeah. Does old age security really give old age security?
No, my wife's client, the government pays for 70% of his housing. He's out at the Hamlets, which is a seniors complex. But once he pays his 30%, he's got maybe $400 a month left to survive. That's it, $400 fucking dollars.
And they need public transit most of the time.
Yeah.
They can't afford their own
he
vehicle.
needs a walker to get around, so he can't drive. He needs assistance when he's trying to get to the bus.
Less able-bodied, right? I really want to put some of those things into perspective when we have societal occurrences like that. And I get that, I'm not saying that drugs and homelessness and all of those things are not issues. I'm just saying when we are allocating resources, those things start to stand out as what's more important sometimes. And like, I get they're all important,
But
right?
but what is, there's a whole part of the population that's basically being ignored in favor of another part, and that's not right.
Yeah, and I feel like in Kamloops, maybe we are coming up with a couple housing things or whatever, but it has been a giant gap and a huge issue, and families have tried to advocate. You know, I knew one gal, and both of her grandparents were aging. They had tried to live on their own with supports and all of this. It ended up becoming end of life. They've been together for over 70 years or something. And she could not get them together to sleep in the same bed so they could die together, essentially.
Wow.
But she did. And
Good for her.
And they did very shortly into that. And it was a really beautiful end of life journey. But holy shit, did she need to fight? It was wild.
It's ridiculous.
It was wild what was not available. And it wasn't because the people in the roles didn't want it to happen, but sometimes there's so many rules and segregation around who can access what and why that like this basic, really reasonable thing that everyone probably agreed needed to happen couldn't because of the red tape.
Yeah. And well,
You
we
know?
both worked in government and know how red tape works. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, totally. So I definitely don't want to say that like I'm not slamming the homeless funding initiatives and all of that, but we have an influx of that problem, therefore an influx of visibility because people see it. We don't see a bunch of elderly people walking on the friggin' streets.
No, we don't.
We see bunged up hospitals and things like that, you know, show up in different ways. Or families overburdened and people undercared for.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So there's all of those kinds of things that really make me think about like how our larger macro systems facilitate ageism. Yeah.
Big time. Big time.
And another thing, so switching it, I had a conversation with somebody who is in sort of like a larger institution, and all of the high ups, all of the senior sort of workers, executives, it was like things in the lower levels. There were people missing and they needed positions picked up and this and that. So all of these higher executives were being asked to pick up these extra projects or these extra roles because they were empty. And I said to the person, like, that seems crazy to burn out and overuse your most valuable resources. Why wouldn't you look at longevity of the investment and take somebody who's below that role and train them? They are more eager than someone to step down and do a job that is below them.
Yeah.
Someone below a job is more eager to step up and do a job above them. But that's an experience. That's ageism as well.
Big
in
time.
terms of like we only honor and give opportunity potentially to people who have already been there. But then we also kind of disregard them by saying, here, this job below you needs to be done. Can you dilute what you're doing and the importance of what you're doing and cover this too?
Yeah, it's overworking someone.
Right?
Whereas bringing someone up who has
Which is
the
a
energy to do
disrespect.
it is. It's totally disrespectful. And I think that's where we just don't think through the whole thing, right?
We devalue so much. And I think there's so much value in mentorship and teaching others to do what the exceptional few can do.
Yes.
Right?
And as we get older, like I'm at a point in my life where if I were in, say, a job like that, I would be looking at exiting.
Yeah.
And then training the next generation to come up. I wouldn't want to be doing more.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
and that's
it
exactly
makes
it.
no
And
sense.
when I reframed it, I said, listen, like when I was a younger worker in government, I took on everything. I didn't have kids yet. I was proving myself. I still had open wounds of maybe not being good enough or, you know, enough pizzazz and spunk and enthusiasm. Like I had it. That's when you give those roles, right?
Yeah.
That's when you let them rip. Like they will work hard. Don't find someone who's like 35 years in and already like maximum capacity and running family stuff at the same time.
And
like,
at that point, probably counting down the days till they can
Yes!
leave, like,
Yeah!
wanting to get out.
Totally. So just different values of age and experience at that point too, and how that shows up in really counterproductive ways. Right?
Hugely counterproductive.
Yeah.
But that's kind of our
It makes
society.
sense,
Yeah, it makes sense.
right?
But it's, yeah.
Yeah. So when we think about ageism, what are some of the things that come up? You know, for like I said, for a few of my clients, some big things is like they're starting to feel invisible.
Mm-hmm.
Even sometimes to their partner, to themselves, they might feel less attractive. They might feel like they've slowed down. They can't do the things they used to be able to do the same way. They still see themselves that way, but their bodies aren't doing that the same way.
Oh, yeah. I can speak to this from a firsthand experience lately. I have started doing boot camp.
Good for
2
you.
to 3 times a week.
Good for you, Jay.
Because I need to get my cardio. Like,
Yeah.
as I get older,
Yeah.
you need to get your cardio going.
need
and
that
and
too.
things weren't happening that I was doing before that was getting my cardio going. But Jesus. My ass gets kicked every class. Like 10 years ago, when I was got it first into boxing and kickboxing, I'd say the workouts were equally as hard, but I bounced back quicker. And now I'm noticing the next day, like I'm sore.
Son of a gun.
Something in my right hand, I heard it doing like burpees yesterday. And it's just like, I'm just like, yep, it's 10 years does make a difference. It really does. But at the same time, I'm able to do it. I put in the full hour, I do the hard work, and I can do it. And I'm going to do that as long as I can, because the people who I kind of, I guess I would say admire, that are older, like say the Harrison Fords of the world and everything, and even Clint Eastwood, who's 95 and still making movies.
Is he 95?
He's 95.
Holy shit.
But the point is, he's able to do that because they didn't stop.
Yep.
And I think as we get older, we see that our bodies aren't working the same way, and so we stop.
Yeah.
And you can't stop. I have a friend of mine who just turned 50 and is really struggling to try to get back into shape because he's having like blood clots and things like that already, and cancer. You know what I mean?
Jason, did this guy do his healing? Has he really embarked on like an internal journey?
That I can't speak to. He's got his shit together, like from what I've seen. You know what I mean?
I find that physical ailments start to show up when it's time for us to take that healing to the next level. Our body shows everything, right? So like I always look at what is the continual injury? What is this? What is that? You know, I had this conversation yesterday with somebody because that's where they're like literally forced to slow down because a part of their body is not working, right? And it's killing them, but they also were the one bearing the load of so much for so long. So you do have twofold, and then you have weight gain from that, or you have this, or you have like the cognitive, you know, the depressive side of things too. But this often comes at monumental times that it overlaps with something psycho-emotional, like psychosomatic, psycho-emotional, that is occurring and needing to heal at the same time. And usually, like for you, these last 4 years, 5 years have been really transformative journeys for you. So your body is on your side. It doesn't need to scream at you the same way, and you're capable. If you hadn't have done all that work, do you think your body would be in as good of responsive condition as it is right now?
Oh, no, because I know before I did the work, I had, what was it? I had like literally the arch in my left foot collapsed, like overnight.
Yeah.
I could barely walk, and the doctor was just like, well, I think you're going to have to think of different activities. Like, you're not going to run ever again. You're not going to ride a bike ever again. You're not going to do this and this ever again. Once I started going through therapy, it's like, guess what? I was boxing, I was downhill mountain biking and all that. So, yeah, like I think there's a good point as we get older, sort your shit out.
Yeah.
Because that's going to make sure you live longer, right?
That's the thing. It will show up as illness until you sort that out. And we just have so many ways of like, take this medication, take this, take that. And it's like, but why is it here to begin with? Come on now.
Yeah.
You can't, like, your body has been working exceptional this entire time until it doesn't. What's bogging it down? Do you change the oil in your car? Do you know, all those things. It's the same thing for us. What is the shit we're putting into it? How much do we sit all day long? We've talked about this lots, right?
Oh, huge.
Are you moving your body? And we are becoming a more emotive society. I think we are more emotional. I think we're more emotionally intelligent. So whether people are doing the work or not, they are exposed to a more emotionally available world.
Yeah.
I don't think we needed this as much back then, right? But I would say those are huge pieces in terms of as we're getting older, what are we doing for our body? And again, all those pieces, how do we keep our body working? And we also have this belief of like, as I get older, I'm not going to be able to do these things. And I love Dave Asprey and his approach to aging, anti-aging, and biohacking and all of that. Because this guy is like genetically younger than his age and continues to be. But it's also like, there is nothing, no evidence that says your body can't do at 70 what it could do at 25 if you're doing the right things for it. Like,
no, exactly.
And that's kind of what you're talking about there with Clint Eastwood.
Well, yeah, and then Harrison Ford, like shooting Indiana Jones all night, then hopping on a mountain bike and going on a 50K mountain bike ride,
Totally.
like 80.
Yeah, so like I have a family friend who's in his early 80s, and he religiously goes for a run every morning. Even though one time he fell, busted his jaw, and was out for like however long, but he also is retired from his career and continues to work in like a tutoring kind of position. But this man is like just as active by choice now. Than he ever was, probably more so than he was when he was working for the institution he was working for, right? So those are always profound things to me where I'm just like, I love how disciplined he is, how committed to himself. And he's like a no bullshit guy. He's like, yeah, you go for your run. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, things are going to be hard, but you do it. I mean, if you don't do it, then you're not going to do it, right? And you're going to have arthritis or you're going to, right?
And that's exactly it.
You're going to run and your knee is going to hurt and you're still going to run because there's more benefits to all these other areas of your life, right? So I had this like plantar fasciitis really bugging me those last few weeks, but man, I couldn't wait to get back to Pilates because I was like, I don't care how much it fucking hurts. The rest of my body needs to move.
Yes, it does.
Just because that one part can't doesn't mean the rest can't. Like I need to move everything out because clearly something is stagnant somewhere, right? But all too often we let one ailment shut us down everywhere. We are being encouraged to reroute. Stop defaulting to that one thing all the time.
Well, I think part of it, with that doctor, there was no like, we're going to present solutions. It's like, you can't do this, this, and this, and you need like 8 weeks of bed rest. Whereas in Eastern medicine, like working with Sifu, it's like, I remember like I ripped my arm open in a bike crash and I twisted my ankle really bad. And he's like, okay, the most important, he did this Chinese medicinal stuff. And he's like, and the important thing is don't stop moving.
Yes.
And he says within 2 weeks, you're going to be back. And within 2 weeks I was. I mean, I was wearing an ankle brace, but I was back. And I walked every day. I hobbled every day. Yeah. And I didn't just sit for like 8 weeks.
Yeah. Immobility is a painful. So that's another thing is, how we're treated in the medical system as we age. I think we're disregarded more. We've talked a lot about this. Things get written off as age and explored less. So if I go in, as a 43-year-old with some kind of chest pains, I feel like it's going to get looked at a little more than when the 72-year-old might possibly have some breathing issues or this or that. I mean, or maybe they're going to be looked at it more because they will think more heart-related stuff than they will with me. I do think that there's these biases of like, well, how old are you and how common is that, right?
Yeah.
So there is a lot of like advocacy needed at these different stages. And I think sometimes when we have this senior status and this elder status of like, I've got, through the workforce, the longer you're there, the more respected you're supposed to be, right?
Yes. Yep.
However, in the life course, the longer you're here in Western culture, the least respected you are.
And that is right. That is more of a Western culture thing.
It is,
in the East and in Europe, the elder is like considered like a
the wise
or an indigenous culture.
The ultimate respect you have for them. They carry. They are the like carriers of wisdom and experience, right? So it's really interesting how we disempower that in Western culture, right?
It's
so
bullshit.
We spend our whole lives knowing that the amount of years that get us here gives us respect, and this is where you will see disgruntled older folks really hating the way they are not prioritized in a lineup or given the seat or this or that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, when we move into this world of like, equality and this and that, we forget some of these core values, like, again, big theme in a lot of what we talk about this season is what are the core values that guide behavior, decisions, all of that.
And you're right. It is kind of silly how, like in a workforce, it is valued to a point, but in the rest of the world, it's not. You know what I mean? Or at least our Western world.
And because I suspect if it's all based on, capitalism and the patriarch and how productive you are. So the longer you're there, the more you have produced. And if you stop producing and now re-enter like you're just a non-working old aging person, maybe you can't physically produce as much. Maybe now you're bringing in pension instead of income and product, and you become less important based on, I think, those driving forces.
I think so too. And when you're a senior, you're not working anymore. You've got a fixed income. You're quite often don't own your own house, so you're living in a facility. So in terms of the capitalist view, what value do you bring? You don't, you're done. And even like, I look at like other mediums, like, in terms of entertainment and all that, once you get past 35, you're not the target audience for most of the things. You're not the target audience for music, television, movies, books. Like, you know what I mean? They're all aimed at younger people, which 35, like that's
younger
really weird.
Younger folks who haven't quite defined their authentic existence.
Exactly.
Here. I actually think that's like, you're looking at who is the most influential, who does not have their own solid sense of self, core belonging, and purpose. Because once you get 35 onward, we start to activate that healing in ourselves.
We do,
and really get aligned with our existence and why we're here, we don't pay attention to the bullshit.
No,
we don't
we're
flip
not
to
interested.
those channels. We don't do those things. We don't give a shit about that stuff because we are clear on our path. We are on our highway and we're doing our thing.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah.
Very, very true.
Like, so who is the most influential, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ones you can manipulate to buy your product.
I mean, really, it's a marketing scheme. Who can
sure.
we influence more, right? Who has not yet decided who they are?
There's no internet influencers who are over 22, I don't think, or something like that, or 25, right?
Yeah. And I just think, when we look at aging, what are the things that you think Griffin could benefit from in a generation older than yourself?
I think, especially because his generation, I think, is the most sedentary I've seen ever. So movement, exercise, being encouraged to, there's a big movement going on right now, and I think we'll see it within the next 5 years, where there's going to suddenly be like age warnings on social media. So because they're starting to realize how bad it is for kids. So I think, the awareness that get off your phones or your tech glasses or whatever and just interact in the real world, I think is the big thing, and have real world connections, because that's a generation that's also really lonely.
Yeah.
The same with the one ahead of it, Gen Z or whatever they're called, and very insecure feeling. So I think you sorting that shit out before you get too deep into life. It does, as you get older, like the self-work gets harder and harder because you're more entrenched in your belief systems and maybe the values you shouldn't have.
And you carry more shame. Every year that goes by, we carry more shame, more self-blame, more deflection, more projection, all of that stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's the big thing, is to sort yourself out physically and mentally.
Yeah. And I think, the value of a generation above. So I have the luxury of having my mom and Rick in my kids' lives. And, I think time and attention. So my mom is able to give my kids time and attention that I can't, because when she comes, she usually has 90% capacity. I have like 30, depending on everything I'm doing and what I can give each kid. So when she comes, she often gives them like 100% of her attention. And I love the moments where all of a sudden, like, I don't know, my kids are like gargling because they have a canker sore or something. And they're like, Grandma told me to do it this way, or Grandma taught me how to do it this way. And, all my kids, I know how to sew, and I've sewn my whole life because my mom taught me. But as a mom, if I sat down to teach my kids how to sew, my mom did it first, because on a day that maybe they were sick, I dropped them off at her house, and she has her little quilting room, and she was working on something. So they made a teddy bear.
There you go. Yeah.
Right. So then my kids have sewing in school, and they all know how to sew because Grandma taught them.
Which is brilliant.
And I fucking love that stuff. So those are the moments where I'm so grateful for what this is your traditional elders teaching, life skills based. They have the time, they have the patience, and they have the skill set, right? So those are all pieces that I think, grandparents or that generation can hand down that we don't have capacity for because we are doing all the busy work.
Yeah.
And it was the same with my grandparents when my mom was working and we would get dropped off there at times. There were things I learned and did with my grandma, right?
Same with in my case with my grandpa, right? Like,
absolutely. So I think that, when we can respect that maybe they're not contributing in a certain way, but they can offer lower generations what the main parental kind of age group can't.
Yeah.
Like, we really need to value that. And that's why I love when they put daycares in retirement homes.
Oh, yeah. It's a brilliant idea,
I think there's this beautiful mutual teaching. There's mentorship in both ways, and acknowledgement and value, right? Because I do believe that there is a universal belief that we lose value as we get older. We become more forgotten. Families are busier. They call less. We get isolated. We can't be accessible. We can't go out and find all the people and the things like we used to. Right?
Well, look what happened in the pandemic. Because of the nature of it, that whole population was segregated completely from everybody else in order to protect them. But I don't think many of them got that.
And
like, you know what I mean?
And when we live in a world where now the idea of caring for your elderly family members isn't really mainstream, not a lot of people have capacity for that. And that's why we have care homes. We also lose value that, like, wow, someone's got to be paid to do this. I'm not worthy of just being taken care of.
Yeah, which is sad, actually.
It is, So I think, when we look at a monetary value of aging and then we look at the importance and the value of aging, I think there's a lot of people who would love to have the capacity, but their houses aren't big enough. They work all the time, so they can't physically be there for the person. Like, we live in handcuffed ways that don't even allow us to give value where value needs to be.
And I think the people who would be, say like us, like in
Yeah.
your case with your mom being still alive, you have to earn so much money to keep yourself afloat.
Totally.
Right? And so that requires X number of hours and it leaves less over for your own children, let alone taking care of a parent.
Yeah,
right?
honestly.
Like,
and I think there are so many people that are forced into that situation until they're busting at the seams.
Yeah.
And then nobody wants to feel like a burden. And I think there's a sense of being a burden as we age.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people will talk about that isolation of wanting the connection and wanting the time, but knowing, because they've been there themselves, that their children are over capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
worn completely thin.
Yeah. So I think in Western culture, we probably do the worst at aging.
I say so. I think in the East, like in Asia, and then like in Europe, like within like Italy.
Yeah.
Their whole culture is based around family, right?
Look at how wrinkly the faces of old Italian moms are.
Yeah, but they're all part
Italian
of lives,
grandmas.
and everybody's all interacting with each other.
But they are wrinkly. Do you think they have anti-aging serums there the way they do here? Do you think 25-year-olds are using like hyaluronic acid
don't
or whatever
give a
that is?
shit.
They do not give a shit because they respect aging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like our consumerism industry is it's wild. You look at fashion trends. You look at friggin', I mean, I'm not a TikToker and I think it's shut down by now that we're talking about this. Thank fucking God.
Right.
But I see it on Instagram and stuff. And it's like these like 45-year-olds. And like I still struggle with like, how do I still look my age, but kind of follow the styles. But I also don't want to look like I'm a fucking 20-year-old. Because I'm not.
No, that's
like sometimes I think people are just looking goofy.
they do, or horrible because their
Right?
faces look like they've been remade
all
over
of
and
this
over
filler
again.
and stuff. And it's just like, I have this one wrinkle on my chin that I mentioned to Kevin, and I was like, holy, is this how I'm sleeping or what? But I'm just like, you know what? I'm there. I'm getting to this stage where I'm showing my life. I have had I have had the luxury of looking and appearing younger for most of my life, and that's gonna catch up to me at some point, right?
It's just
And
natural,
it
but embrace
is.
that. The problem
Yeah.
is that as a Western society, we're afraid to die. And it's inevitable. And so we do everything we can to slow that process down without realizing that it doesn't matter. It's going to happen. And you might not even live long enough to age to death. You might get hit by a car. You might there's a bazillion things every day that can kill you that we don't think about.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to challenge you a bit there, Jay. I don't know if we're afraid to die. I feel like we're afraid to get older and not live the way we've been living.
There's a part of that I think
Because
that plays
I think
into
if we were genuinely afraid of dying, we wouldn't do half the shit to our bodies that we're doing.
Well, though when we're younger, we don't consider the fact that we will. We think we're invincible. That's part of it. But I think even the aging plays into dying.
Yes.
Because like for a lot of people, the last like 10 years of their lives are rough.
Yeah.
There's usually health issues because they didn't take care of themselves. They didn't sort their shit out. So the whole process of getting there becomes more and more unattractive as you get closer to it, right?
Oh, and I will tell you, I know so many women in between 30 and 40 years old who have fought and are fighting breast cancer or ovarian cancer now, like these days. And that is, I feel like, profoundly young for what we are thinking we're going to get hit with these illnesses at.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I think some people look at their age and go, oh, I'm only 45 or I'm only 55. I'm not old enough for that ailment yet. Oh, fuck. It's hitting way, way earlier nowadays.
And it could be because of the shit we're eating. It could be because of the stress levels that we've got going on.
So many things.
Yeah, that are vying for attention. Yeah, these things would normally happen in your 50s, 60s, right? So, yeah. Think food for thought, people.
Absolutely. So here I am getting older, being brave about it. I'm courageous, guys. I'm not shaming myself for it. I really don't mind at all.
No, it's
okay.
I've found actually the older I get, the more I enjoy life more.
Oh, I would say
right?
I agree. I am happier. I am more aligned. I am more content the older I get. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a little upbeat note to end things on for you out there. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. And age gracefully.
Yeah.
And you should be fine.
Yeah. Don't resist that shit, guys.
Yeah. Because it's going to happen whether you like it or not.
Yep.
All right. That wraps up this favorite episode of the Into Greatness podcast with Jason and Jolene. We're back next week with your next one. So until then, happy birthday, Jolene.
Thank you.